Jovan, Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another postgame show. The Lakers won 129-101 to improve to 35-24, blowing out the shorthanded Golden State Warriors. First blowout win post All-Star break, first blowout win since the blowout over the Mavericks going into the All-Star break. So the Lakers had several close games, winning a close one against the Clippers, losing a couple against the Magic and the Suns, and also a blowout loss to the Celtics. So this was a much needed win to stop their 3-game skid, a much needed palate cleanser for LA, especially on the offensive end, which we will be touching on in my big picture takeaway. But after the win, LA is now continues to be number 6 in the West, a game and a half behind Denver and Minnesota for the number 4 and 5 seeds, respectively. So we'll be touching on the offense, the new rotation, Luke Kennard, and standings watch with some updates off of the last couple of days. But shout out to the chat, shout out to the late night gang, shout out to everybody. Appreciate you all. Let's get into it. So Buha's big picture is offensive improvement post All-Star break. And there's a little bit of a caveat here because the Lakers entering tonight had just a 113 offensive rating post All-Star break in the previous 4 games and ranked just 17th in the league post All-Star break in terms of offensive rating. Tonight, they exploded for a 134.2 offensive rating against the Warriors. They had at least 30 points in all 4 quarters. They tied their season high with 19 threes made. Looking at it, 3, 4, 5, 6 players hit at least a 3, with all 6 of those players hitting at least 2 threes, and 4 of those players hitting 3 or more threes. So really nice shooting performance from the Lakers, especially coming off of the last few games where they had not been shooting the ball that well. I hope they did not empty the clip for this game and can save it for later in the week when they play, going into next week when they play at Denver on Thursday and then against the Knicks on Sunday. But I wanted to touch on some of the things they've done better offensively because while it's been fair to be doom and gloom with this team over the past week, it's been arguably the worst week of the season, lost 3 in a row. Each loss was deflating, honestly, increasingly deflating in a way. I think the Boston loss might have been more deflating than the Orlando loss, but certainly the Suns loss was up there for worst loss of the season and most deflating loss of the season. And during this stretch, again, they have not been playing their best offensive basketball. But if you look at the Clippers game and you look at tonight, and then you look at parts, segments of the 3-game skid, I think especially in the Suns game, like there were some, we didn't get to touch on it as much because everyone was collectively crashing out, and I supported that based on the result of that game and just how they played and just how bad they were for portions of that game. But there were some things in terms of the big 3 playing better together, some of the offensive stretches they had in that game. We talked about it on Lakers Collective. Like there were some things to be encouraged by coming out of that Suns game, especially against that type of opponent who it's a lot of speed, ball pressure, and they can wreak havoc and have wreaked havoc against the Lakers in the season series. That's why they won it 3-1. But tonight, I thought, was a return to form for LA offensively, and it reminded me of the Clippers game, but at an even higher and more stable level. And we do have to acknowledge no Steph Curry, no Kristaps Porzingis, no Jimmy Butler. He's out the rest of the way. But this was a depleted Warriors group who had been 4-5 without Steph over this stretch, but including beating the Nuggets. But I mean, looking at this group, they could barely generate quality looks in the half court. Part of that it goes to the Lakers defense. Part of that is just the Warriors system does not work the same when Steph Curry is not out there, and just when there's not a certain amount of offensive talent out there. It's not like the Suns where they're beating you off the dribble. They're getting out in they got out in transition a bit, but like there was no Colin Gillespie or Grayson Allen in this game to pick on the Lakers' weaker defenders. It's much more of a team scheme offensively, and when Steph isn't there, it's just not the same. So I do want to just acknowledge that caveat within this, but even so, I thought the Lakers' offensive performance tonight left me encouraged, and I think there's a lot to take from some of the recent developments. So one of the big things for me has been their off-ball actions and off-ball movement. It's been a lot of just wide pin downs and weak side flare screens for some combination of Luka, Austin, LeBron, and Luke Kennard. I think LeBron like the least in some of those things because LeBron, they've had a heavy dose of him in the post. But I really liked like tonight, Austin scored 11 of his 18 points in the first quarter. He got off to a great start. A couple of those were off of pin downs and one time curling into the lane, and then he had that floater where he faked the lob to Jackson. Another time flaring out for a three, had a move where he broke pods off the dribble and then scored over Draymond. So I thought it was a bit like ultimately the production, like the Lakers basically played 3 quarters. Luka didn't play in the fourth. I don't think Austin played in the fourth either. I think only LeBron played in the fourth. And we'll talk about the new rotation, but like those guys all did their work through the first 3 quarters for the most part. And I thought Austin tailed off over the last couple quarters, but had a really strong start. And I think he has been someone who has really benefited from being used in that way. And we saw that against the Clippers as well. But they did some of that for Luka as well. And I think Luka setting up those plays, bringing the ball up, and not going into pick and rolls, but letting the Lakers run actions and also the coaching staff enforcing that. Like, I think that has been a bit of progress there. But Luka coming off of pin downs as well. Like, I think Luka, that's one of the most underrated parts of his game is his ability to operate off the ball. We don't see it a lot, but when we do see it, I think he's a pretty efficient and effective off-ball scorer. And then LeBron, the 3-point shot fell tonight. It was his best 3-point shooting performance of the season. First time in a game this season that he had 4 threes in a half. He scored 20 of his 22 in the first half. So LeBron's jumper was falling, but he also had some nice drives and post-ups. Lakers really attacked their smaller players with Luka and LeBron in the post, and that led to a bevy of kick-out passes, some passes for cutters, and just a lot of good stuff offensively. So I think in general, like my big picture takeaway, my macro takeaway here is I think the Lakers, from a process perspective, there are things to be encouraged by with the Lakers offense. Now, they have to do this consistently, and that has been the challenge with this team all season. It's just like nothing has really been consistent other than Luka's going to put up his numbers. Austin, up until recently, had been providing a certain amount of stability. LeBron has provided a certain amount of stability. Outside of the big three, you don't really know what you're getting night to night from the players, and you haven't really known what you're getting night to night from the coaching staff. And so like stability is the key thing here, and consistency is the key thing here for LA moving forward in terms of like how much, like it's one thing to do this against the Warriors. It's another thing to do this Thursday in Denver. It's another thing to do this Sunday, next Sunday against New York. But there has been some progress, and the Clippers, for example, are a really good defensive team. That's been one of their calling cards as they've made this push after the 6-21 start. So doing it against the Clippers, dropping 125 on them, dropping 129 tonight. Like I've liked the offensive process more. I think there's been more actions with the big three, different horns actions or stack actions, and also finding each other in early offense, transition. I just think that there's been like a better synergy between the big three and the ways that they're interacting. I also think the new rotation has helped, which is something we'll touch on with one of the takeaways. But I don't want to read too much into this game. Like, I don't know that we necessarily learned anything that we didn't know about the team or about a specific player. But in general, I've liked the parts of the offensive process. And if we want to extrapolate anything from this game, I think that is a key thing to take moving forward. In terms of notable performers, we have to start with the birthday boy. Luka Doncic turned 27 today on his 27th birthday. 26 points, 6 rebounds, 8 assists, 1 steal, 1 block, 2 turnovers, 9 for 17 shooting, 4 for 9 on threes, 4 for 4 at the free throw line. Really efficient performance from Luka. Had a quiet first half by his standards, only 10 points, and was more in facilitator mode early. But LeBron got it going, Austin got it going, and I thought that was an encouraging thing to see from Luka, of like his teammates got it going and he was getting off the ball. And I know there's been a lot of scrutiny and criticism of Luka lately, but I thought tonight was one of his best performances in terms of the shot pass decision making and just attacking versus getting off of the ball, and just got into a really nice flow there, particularly coming out of halftime when he hit 4 threes in the third quarter, scored 16 of his 26 in the third before calling it a night, which has been a rarity for him, right? We talked about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and how many fourth quarters he sat out. It's been rare for Luka to sit out a fourth quarter this season, just because the Lakers have not had many blowouts, or if they've had blowouts, it's been the opposite end, and then Luka's playing to start the fourth to see if LA can make some sort of comeback. But it was nice to see him get a break, and I just thought tonight, operating again on the ball in the pick and roll, off of the ball with some of those off-ball actions, post-ups, getting out in transition, early offense, and then I think also just making a lot of high-level plays offensively. Just a really good game from, good and efficient game from Luka. LeBron, mentioned it earlier, 20 of his 22 in the first half, also had 7 points, 9 assists, nearly had a triple-double, 1 steal, 4 turnovers. Had like a bit of a choppy start early. He got blocked in the post by DeAnthony Melton, had a couple of early turnovers, but then from that point on, I thought he was really good, and 7 for 13 shooting, 4 for 6 on threes, 4 for 5 on free throws. Like, when LeBron's three is falling, it's a game changer for his offensive game and the way that it bends the floor for LA. Austin, 18 points, 1 rebound, 3 assists, had 11 of his 18 in the first quarter, 7 for 11 shooting. So in a really efficient performance from him. Continues to be more third in the pecking order behind Luka, of course, and LeBron. But I've talked about it before. I think the pathway forward and the best balance with the big three is going to be like Luka is the clear number one option, but behind that, I think using Austin more as a scorer and leveraging his off-ball movement and off-ball capabilities and his shooting, and then with LeBron having him operate more in the post and leveraging his facilitating. So tonight we see that gap there in terms of LeBron with 9 assists, Austin with 3. I think that low end for Austin in terms of assists, but like I think Austin in that like 4 to 6 assist range is more realistic with this current role and offensive ecosystem. And then I think LeBron is going to be in that like 7 to 10 assist range, just depending on his usage on a given night. Marcus Smart hit a couple of threes. He was part of the group of guys that were shooting the ball well. 5 rebounds, 8 points, 1 assist, 2 steals. I thought he had some good defensive moments, like a lot of Marcus moments. Nothing that like really stood out, but he was a part of several of those first half, big runs that the Lakers had. DeAndre Ayton, had 10 rebounds, but 4 points, 2 for 5 shooting, with all 3 of those shots basically being point blank misses. Got fouled on an interior attempt, missed both free throws, and then the only way it was, listening to it on the broadcast, I found it kind of entertaining, but they were talking about how like the only way the Warriors could end up scoring on the Lakers was either in transition or just their baseline cutting and like getting into the teeth of the Lakers defense. And they had a lot of nice interior passing, some back cuts and layups and whatnot. But in that first shift, there were three, it wasn't consecutive, but it was like three transition buckets by the Warriors where DA was either directly the culprit or partly, like maybe it was a couple guys and he was one of the two guys, but just the lollygagging in transition, honestly on both ends, because he's jogging offensively as well, but you just see, it looks like he's running in molasses in shifting end to end, and he's in good shape. He's a very athletic big man. I don't get it, but like some part of him shifting like the urgency side, end to end just isn't there lately. And I thought this was like another overall, I thought he was bad defensively again. Had some nice possessions, like switched out onto the perimeter, but the interior defense, anytime he was in the mix, they were scoring over him or around him, giving up offensive rebounds and not getting back in transition or not rotating. So, and then missing point blank shots. So the rebounding was nice, although you could also, if you wanted to play devil's advocate, be like, their entire starting group was 6'7" or below. So he should kind of walk into 10 rebounds. I don't think that's that big of an ask for him, but yeah, I would say overall another subpar performance from him, and continues the troubling trend of his recent play. Off the bench, Luke Kennard, I'm going to save him for one of my takeaways, but 16 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, a steal, 6 of 10 shooting, 4 for 7 on threes. His most threes made as a Laker. And then Jake LaRavia, 15 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, a steal. Some of the scoring was in garbage time, but I thought it was a solid 2-way game for Jake. One thing I really like about Jake, the more I watch him, is just the physicality off ball, and sometimes he'll get called for fouls on those, but Jake is like mauling guys off the ball, and I mean that in a positive way. Like there's some OKC in Jake's game, and again, I mean that in a positive way, where like he's just very handsy and strong and physical, and I like the tone that sets with some of the off ball defense. So he did like there were some. I will note like. The Lakers gave up 101 points. And this is not a Jake thing, just to be clear. They gave up 101 points. They had a 105 defensive rating. I think the defense in the second half was much better than the defense in the first half. I thought the Lakers, like the Warriors shot, and Tim Legler talked about this late in the game about like they were asking how much of this tonight was the Lakers defense versus the Warriors offense. And Tim Legler said he didn't like the shot quality in the first half. I would agree with that. I also think the Warriors got a bunch of good looks and just missed them. So I thought the Lakers had like probably like a B- defensive performance in the first half that on paper looked like an A defensive performance from like a results perspective. But then I would say in the second half, it was closer to like a B+ A- defensive performance. And then that ultimately netted out in the performance that it did. I mean, technically they allowed more points by a little bit here in the second half, but I thought Golden State got much better looks and there was better flow in their offense in the first half. They just couldn't capitalize. So that to me is where sometimes process and results don't align. And for me, I thought the Warriors got better looks than the score indicated, in my opinion. And the Lakers were bad in transition defensively in the first half, and they were bad off the ball. I mean, the Warriors are just a tough matchup for them in that regard. Of the Lakers are bad at off ball defense, the communication, switching off of the ball, they just give up back cuts, give up offensive rebounds. It's been an issue for them all season. So not to be clear, not to single out Jake. Jake was part of that at times. I thought Luke was part of that. Austin was part of that. Luka was part of that. LeBron was part of that. Like there was a lot of blame to go around in terms of the off ball botching of certain things, but reminded me of that. Then Jackson Hayes, 6 points, 5 rebounds, came in, did his job. I thought played with a lot more energy at the center position. And you see, immediately he gets a lob from Luka. Like there's just a connection there that I don't think is quite there in the current starting group. Then Maxi Kleber came in. The Lakers dusted off Maxi, and he played a lot in the fourth quarter in garbage time, so some of these numbers were skewed a little bit. But 4 points, 3 blocks from Maxi. He had 1 in garbage time. A steal, like he was out there playing good defense, so Maxi showing some signs of life there. Vando has been completely buried. We will touch on that in my takeaway on the new rotation, but Vando played 4 minutes through the first 3 quarters. This is the second consecutive game that Rui has missed where Vando has been an afterthought. He played 6 minutes against the Suns, ended up playing 12 minutes tonight because he played the final 8 minutes in the fourth quarter. But through the normal-ish rotation, if you want to even extend it into like the first few minutes of the fourth because LeBron played in the fourth, Vando did not play during that stretch and ended up playing again only 12 minutes tonight. So that's something of note with the new rotation. Then DK and Kobe Buffkin played in garbage time. I'm not missing anybody yet because there's no Rui right now with the illness, and that's it. Then Adu and Bronny are both with South Bay, but Kobe Buffkin I think is angling for the Dalton Connect Award of garbage time All-Star, but he comes in and he chucks it, right? 2 for 5 in 6 minutes, also with 4 free throw attempts. So his usage rate was definitely north of 30. It might have even been north of 40. But, it's a good opportunity for him to get into the game and show what he could do offensively, though I would like to see a little bit more of a team-centric approach from him. And then DK had a quiet shift, went 0 for 1 in his 6 minutes. In terms of stat of the night, for me, it has to be the season-high tying 19 three-pointers. The Lakers, as we know, are a below-average three-point shooting team in terms of makes, percentage, attempts across the board. They are bottom 10 in all 3, or right there about bottom 10 in all 3 categories. So any night that the Lakers have an avalanche of threes, and any night they're shooting 46% on 41, like 41 threes is high for the Lakers. 19 threes made is, of course, tied for a season high, but then 46% made is also up there for one of the best shooting performances of the season. And you factor in the volume, and this is right there with their best shooting performance. So for their sake, I hope they didn't unload the clip in like a game that they were going to win, whether they shot the ball well or not. But it's at least good to see, like, when they are making threes, it's just so difficult to defend the offense. And then 3 takeaways here before we get into the Q&A. Takeaway number 1 is some changes with the new rotation. So one of the things JJ's talked about recently has been altering the bench groups to play Luka and Austin more together, and then play LeBron more in his own separate lineups. That is something that's been reflected in the lineup data. It's something that we've talked about on this show. We've also talked about it on Lakers Collective, where if you parse through the 2 man lineup data, the individual lineup data and the trio lineup data with the big 3, the big 3 have been a net negative. It's been trending up these last couple games against the Suns and the Warriors. So that will start to stabilize that a bit. But within like the combinations of either the guys individually or the guys as a duo, the 2 best combinations. So again, looking at Luka and Austin, Luka and LeBron, Austin and LeBron, and then each of those 3 individually with the other 2 off, the 2 best combinations up to this point in the season have been Luka and Austin, which has been crushing. It crushed last year. It's been crushing this year. And this is Luka and Austin without LeBron specifically. It crushed before LeBron returned. It crushed last year. It's crushed this year. And that has been a good combination for LA this season. Then the other one has been LeBron by himself. And when LeBron has led some of these bigger bench groups and in some of these Banshee-led groups that are playing zone defense and getting after it defensively, getting out in transition. The offense runs through LeBron, often out of the post, and then you have guys cutting and screening off of that. That has been an effective look for LA as well. So JJ has tried to extend those shifts, and one of the ways he's done that has been changing the rotation a bit, where now Austin is staying in longer, and so LeBron often comes out around that like 6-minute mark or so. So now Austin is staying in longer than normal, and you're getting an extended run of Austin and Luka. Then they're both coming out, and LeBron's coming in back in with Marcus. And Marcus is now the secondary ball handler, playmaker. And one of the interesting things with the last couple of games has been there's been a trio of players who have been, and it's basically the 3 bench guys that JJ has trusted over the last couple of games. But he's tried to keep this combination of Jackson, Jake, and Luke together. And then it's shifted where they close the first quarter, or like they play part of the first quarter with Austin and Luka, then they play the end of the quarter with LeBron and Marcus, then they go into the second quarter or the fourth quarter if it mirrors the second half, with Marcus and LeBron, and then they eventually work their way back to the starters. But that's been an interesting trio, because if you think about it, like Jackson, I really like Jackson anytime he's with Luka because of their lob connection. But even with LeBron, I think there could be some force there, and like he fits into the Banshee groupings. But then they've also gone to a little bit of today they went to Maxey out there with Vando, and then against the Suns, that was also part of the Vando shift that did not go well. So like they've been mixing it up a bit, but like that general framework of the first like 16 minutes of both halves has been similar the last couple of games. And now of note, there's been no Rui. So I think Rui will change that, and it'll be interesting to see which group Jake plays more with, which group Rui plays more with. Like we had seen coming out of the All-Star break, some more Rui and Luke with Luka. I don't know if you can get away. Like there was some problematic possessions in this game of Luka, Austin, and Luke. I think you are really limited there 1 through 3 defensively in a concerning way against like serious teams, against really good teams. So if you add Rui into that, I have some real concerns about like that 1 through 4, but maybe they're good enough offensively, maybe against some of these hybrid bench starter counterparts, like they can hold their own. I do wonder about that. But I've liked the new shift in the rotation. Really, the only thing I'll quibble with is I think Vando could stand to play more. I know he didn't have a good shift against the Suns, but it feels like he's getting phased out of the rotation now. And when they're at full strength, he's going to be clearly the 10th guy, and they might run more of like a 9.5 man rotation where Vando's on the outside looking in. And then I still am beating the drum for more Jackson than DA. I mean, I would straight up start Jackson over DA. Crane just tweeted this out, but B-Ball Index has their expected net ratings for certain groupings that they calculate it. If you swap in Jackson for DA, that group would have a +8 expected net rating, which I believe would be the best of any like primary Lakers lineup. So I think that is a swap I would make at some point here down the stretch of the season. I don't think it's going to happen. I think DA is going to continue to start, but I would close that gap between the two minutes wise, and I would close games with Jackson or Small, and pretty much exclusively go. Like I do not trust DA down the stretch of a close game. But yeah, I think it's been interesting to see less Vando, even without, like, if there was ever a time that Vando would potentially even play more, it'd be now because there's no Rui. But even you got to think if Rui or not if, but when Rui returns, he's going to take the Vando minutes plus Jake's minutes plus Luke's minute, chip away at those guys. So it's like, I just don't see where Vando fits into the healthy rotation right now. Then takeaway number 2 is Luke Kennard and the blender. And this is something that JJ talked about after the game, but Luke is really good at getting teams into the blender. And tonight was his best offensive performance as a Lakers. 16 points, 6 of 10 shooting, 4 for 7 on threes. We saw some flare actions for him that I'd like to see more of just in general. Like the Lakers were, before they traded Gabe Vincent, they were running 2 to 4 flare actions a game for Gabe and getting him these looks that, it's going to be easier to get Gabe Vincent those looks than Luke Kennard, which is the way that teams respect Luke and guard him. And he is the laser on the scouting report. But I think LA could do a better job of generating threes for him. And I think that's, we've talked about sometimes DA and Brewy can be like a barometer for LA's offense. And if DA is scoring a lot, getting a lot of easy buckets, if Rui's getting a lot of easy buckets, that means the Lakers offense is in a good place. I think it's a similar thing here with Luke Kennard. But the biggest thing with Luke has been, to me, like his 2-point shooting and finishing. He's shooting over 80% on twos this season. As a Laker, it's a small sample size that will come down, but he's just so efficient, and he's not like, when you think about like a quick guard, you think about John Wall, Derrick Rose, John Morant, De'Aaron Fox, like that type of player. He's not that, of course, but he does have this speed of, especially when he has an advantage on a closeout, he just attacks into the gap. And from there, he had 3 assists tonight, and I believe at least 2 of those were driving kick threes. And so, and I think he had a pass, a nice, I think it was a pocket pass, but it could have been a little dump off to Jackson for a dunk. But Luke, as a secondary creator and playmaker, I've really liked. Tonight was his Lakers high in terms of threes made. Also, I believe in terms of threes attempted. So, I mean, I also think like he's a guy that will benefit from if the big 3 are firing on all cylinders and there's a synergy there, and now you have to double and blitz Luka, or now you have to double LeBron. There's going to be more breakdowns in the defense, and Luke is a guy who can benefit off of that. So, but the point being with the blender, like Luke is a guy who will attack a closeout, get to the rim, driving kick, finish himself. He's had some nice crafty finishes around the basket, and I just think he's been a nice wheel greaser for LA, and they don't have that consistently necessarily, right? Like I think Jake can do that a bit too, but Jake can also have the games where he's not as confident or not as efficient offensively. Sometimes those are turnovers. Rui does not do that. Vando does not do that. Marcus does it more so he'll either look to score or like he will find the big sometimes, but it's just a little bit different when Luke is doing that on the weak side compared to those guys. I also think in part because of the threat of his shot, anytime there's a closeout on him, the defender is panicking because they don't want him to shoot it. That allows him to get downhill and create an advantage. So I've really liked his advantage creation and advantage extending within LA's offense. I think that's been a nice wrinkle. Now, I have said I think he's clearly a defensive liability, and there is going to be a limitation at some point. I think especially in the playoffs with like how much he can play. But if he's doing this in like a 12 to 15 minute couple shifts, I still think that's valuable for LA's offense. And then takeaway number 3 before we get into the Q&A here, standings watch. So tonight, Houston lost by 10 to the Heat. So they are a little bit closer to the Lakers now. They remain in 3rd, but the Lakers are only a couple games back now of Houston, 2 back in the win column and the loss column. And then yesterday, one of the best games of the season. I'm sure you guys saw the fallout from that with Nikola Jokic and Lou Dort. But OKC Denver, that game went into overtime. One of the best games I've seen this season. OKC pulled it out without Shea in OT because he was on a minutes restriction. He just returned from injury. He still dropped. It was not an efficient game for Shea. And the funny thing is, like, he'll often be compared and contrasted to Luka for his efficiency, but he had 36 points in 34 minutes, which is obviously mean, that's a pretty effective 34-minute stint, but on 12 of 29 shooting. Still a great game from him. Jokic had 23, 17, and 14, but the big thing for the Lakers was with Denver losing. Like, I think the Lakers wanted both of those teams to lose, but with Denver losing, the Lakers are now only a game back of them in the loss column, 2 in the win column, 1.5 overall, 1.5 behind Minnesota. And then the Lakers play Denver next week. So that is a huge game for the Lakers on Thursday in Denver. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A. First one from Notorious CRG. Thank you for the super chat. We have Drew, Jax, Kleba, yet DA still gets the most minutes despite his public attitude and on-court play. Needs to be benched a game or two. Send a message. So I've been on record and I've been saying this now for about a week and a half that I think DA should be moved to a bench role and that Jackson should start over him. That does not seem to be in the cards at least right now. I think he would have to have, like, maybe he has a really rough game against Denver. Then they got the Denver, New York, Minnesota gauntlet of Denver, Indiana, but Indiana's second out of a back-to-back, then New York, then Minnesota. So that 3 out of 4 stretch there, if he's rough in those 3 or even like 2 of the 3, I think JJ has to have a real sit down with the coaching staff and then subsequently DA about just where things are at. Because I will, in JJ's defense, say like he has progressively phased DA, like DA's role has progressively decreased throughout the season in terms of first 6-7 weeks. He was locked in 30, 32 minutes. He was closing every game. Like anytime there was a closing situation, crunch time situation, he was closing over Jackson. Like he was the de facto closer. That has gone out the window. He, since late December in actual closing situations, this is an unofficial stat, but I pay attention to this pretty closely. I would, off the top of my head, I would say it's probably been like 60% of the time, 60 to 65% of the time, he has not been closing, whether the Lakers go with Jackson or Maxey or they go small. So they've been closing less with him. They've been lowering his minutes to low to mid 20s. So that's progress, right? And there is a political element here where I do think if you bench him, you risk losing him entirely. Now we could debate whether I think they need the theoretical version of him and they need like the best version of him. But I would argue even the Orlando game, I think his defensive performance like undermined a lot of the offensive contributions. So it's like, if he just getting pushed around in there and it's a layup line. And like, I think you started to see teams target him even more. I thought both Phoenix and Orlando and even the Clippers, like it's on the scouting report now, target DA and DA is often, I would even argue he's like often the weak link in that starting group. Like it's obviously not Marcus, but people are going to look at the big 3. I think recently he's been worse than any of the big 3 defensively in totality. Like he's just the lack of motor, the lack of second efforts, not getting back in transition, not boxing out, or just getting pushed around by some bigger guys. Like it's just been, I think it's been a quiet disaster. Like everyone focuses on the offensive production and the rebounding and like him missing layups and stuff. I just think the defense has been just flat out bad. And that's the part that's kind of there was someone did a montage, shout out to whoever did it. I'm sorry, I don't remember who did it. Someone did a 1-minute montage of all these screw ups that he had against the Suns where Marcus and LeBron and everyone was getting on him. And like, he just not trying and not rotating. It was pretty bad. So if the ESPN article was not enough to spark, like he's been bad in both, I would say both games since the ESPN article. If that didn't like light the fire for him to play more consistently and with more focus and just like tenacity, I don't know what, like, that nothing is like. If you're getting clowned all day for not being as good as Clint Capella after you said you're better than Clint Capella and you were offended by that comparison, I don't know what's going to work here. So to this point, I do like, look, none of these guys are the three guys we're all talking about as potential replacements are all bench guys. And if we're being like, Maxey and Drew Timmy would not play for any of the other serious West teams. They would not play for OKC or San Antonio or Minnesota or Houston or Denver. Jackson, maybe I think like situationally would potentially play in Denver as like a counter to Jonas Valanciunas, depending on the matchup. And then Houston, I think he's better than Capella, ironically. Jackson might play for a couple of these teams, but point being, like, we're still talking about three bench bigs as like an alternative here. I think DA is also a bench big, so I guess we're splitting some hairs there. But I would say, like, I don't trust Drew Timmy yet, and I think he's clearly limited defensively. I also don't trust Maxey. We've seen like he's been hit or miss. Largely, I would say like he's hit in a lot of his rotation opportunities, but like there has been some drop off, right? And he had the couple games before the All-Star break, but then it became clear that like it's not an every night. Maxey's not like an every night reliable guy at this point of his career. So if you start, I mean, my ideal would be starting Jackson and ultimately splitting the big man minutes in roughly three ways of Jackson, DA, and small ball. But I think if you move DA to the bench, you just really risk losing him and isolating him. So I don't think it's going to happen, but I'm hopeful that if this recent play in recent subpar play continues, that like at some point the Lakers are going to have to pull the plug, whether that's moving him to the bench or just out of the rotation entirely. Jay, thank you for the super chat. Positive regression in bronze 3 would be massive for this team down the stretch. If he can somehow hit 38% rest of the way, things could get fun. Yes, and that was part of what I was trying to get at earlier with some of the shooting stuff and LA's some of the developments recently offensively. Like, I think there is a pathway here, and I remain cautiously optimistic for LA's offensive ceiling. I have basically given up on the defensive side. I don't think there's anything. The cavalry is not coming on the defensive side. There's nothing that's going to stop the bleeding here. I think, again, I think tonight, a lot of their defensive success was based on the opponent and based on the opponent having a subpar performance. Now, they deserve some credit. I'm not saying they did not impact the game at all defensively, but I still remain like concerned, to say the least, on the defensive side. Like the Lakers entered tonight 24th in defensive rating, and I made the distinction that like Denver's in the same range, but I watched that game last night, and like that level of defense from Denver, including holding Shea to 12 of 29 shooting, I've not seen the Lakers have that type of defensive. And even guys that you like, Cam Johnson, I thought had a really good. He missed a couple of big threes late. He had some really good defensive plays in that game, and was matched up with Chet a lot of that game. I've not seen the Lakers defend like that against a serious team, and then even going back to the beginning of the season, Denver was a top 10 defense until they got injured. So the only reason I bring that up is because like that's the only team that you could compare to the Lakers and be like, well, they're also not good defensively. But the Lakers, I just think, are not good defensively. There's no way around it. They're a bottom 10 defense. If they're lucky, they finish around like 20th maybe at this point. But the offensive side is where if the big three continue to progress and the Lakers can remain organized offensively, and some of these positive developments with the rotation, also with how they're using guys off the ball and just running more actions, if they can maintain that, and then you add in LeBron and his shooting. Luka has obviously been trending in the right direction for a while with his shooting. Maybe get Luke and Rui going a little bit more. that's where this team, I think, can hit a top 5 or top 3 level offensively. And if you're 20th defensively and third offensively, you're still probably not doing much in the playoffs, but you at least have like a puncher's chance. Like that's the path to LA, I think, having a chance to make some noise in the playoffs. Because right now they're outside the top 10 offensively. And I think that is, it's on a lot of people, but I do look at the coaching staff of like, I think it's been 2 consecutive seasons where this group has underachieved offensively. And they should easily be a top 10 offense, if not a top 5 off. Like that is their path to success. And they are a better half court offense. If you look at like cleaning the glass and where they rank, I forget off the top of my head, and they lead the league in field goal percentage. So like they are one of the best offenses in certain categories, but this should easily be a top 10, if not top 5 offense. And I think LeBron hitting his threes at not even the rate he's hit them the last couple of years, but to your point, like closer to that, because he's been a plus 40% 3-point shooter on catch and shoots the last couple of years. If he gets that to 36, 37, 38%, that does change the ceiling for LA. And then several here from J Earth follows up. Big 3 played great tonight. Not one guy was a ball hog. All got their looks and played through each other. Good to see. Back-to-back plus net rating games. Good for the Lakers net rating tonight. Good for the point differential. They'll be back in the positive. You put big 3 in quotes. I know some people have an issue with it. I guess like the only person I will entertain like some quibbling with is Austin, right? Because Luka's obviously, if we're calling this a big 3, like Luka, of course, is the centerpiece. And LeBron, well, I think in totality, he has been the Lakers' 3rd best player this season, and Austin has been their 2nd. Like LeBron is LeBron, arguably the greatest player of all time. And you know, he's of a certain status and stature that LeBron, like if there's a big 3, LeBron is part of it. Austin is the one guy that we can debate whether like where he falls in terms of, does he count as a big 3 third option or whatnot? I would contend that he's averaging 25 points a game. He has statistically been one of the best offensive performers in the season. You look at any offensive metric, B-Ball Index just put it out that one of their offensive metrics, he's 4th, and like 2nd is Jokic. I think Luka's 1st. Like the top 4, I believe, is Luka, Jokic, Shea, Austin. Like you look at the pick and roll metrics, like Austin has been a stud offensively this season. So you can debate like whether he's actually a star and whether he deserves like that 3rd billing, but I mean he's averaging like most third options don't average 25 a game, and technically he's been the 2nd option because he's averaging more points per game than LeBron. But that's the one we could debate on. And like if you think about other big 3s, it's like, okay, Boston, they had Ray Allen had been a first team All NBA guy, like prime star, all-star level guy. Chris Bosh, another guy of that caliber. Kevin Love, I would say like a little lower than those guys in terms of his like individual success prior to joining Cleveland. But Draymond or Clay, like go through the list, and there are obviously some decorated big 3s. So I think that moniker just gets thrown around in general. It's easier to say than like Luka, LeBron, Austin every single time. Big 3, it's quicker. But I get it. If I know people have pushed back on that. Then JM, I keep wanting to say Earth, but it's J. I'm not even going to try and pronounce it. I'm sorry. I'll just say J. Jay says 7 3-point attempts for Kennard tonight with the hard eyes emoji. That was great. I love that. And again, several flare actions for him that I would like to see the Lakers run more frequently. And then he says, man, the Braun plus Banshees minutes are just so good. Yes. And I really like JJ leaning into the data and there being some process behind the rotation, because I felt like there's not been process behind the rotation for quite a while, quite a chunk of the season, sticking with the starting group, sticking with a lot. Like, I mean, we were even in that 15-4 start, you looked at, I think it was around the 15-4 start, like 4 of the Lakers' top 6 lineups were net negatives. And they just have stuck with some things a little bit longer than they should have this season. I think JJ's been much better with the rotation decisions the last like 15 to 20 games. So kudos to him. And also kudos to LeBron for carrying those lineups offensively and those lineups carrying LeBron defensively and LeBron fitting into those. So yeah, I've really enjoyed LeBron plus the Banshees. Connor Phillips says, thank you for super chat. Kennard is a must keep in the offseason. He's great. Yeah, I mean, so on that front, like you then have to decide how much are you going to pay him, and are you going to use your rights on him, or are you going to rescind the rights and then hope you can sign him as a minimum guy, or as in a potential, the Lakers will have the room exception, which is about like $9 million-ish. So I've talked about it before, but right now it's looking like the Lakers are if they rescind the rights to everyone that they can rescind the rights for outside of Austin, because the plan is to keep Austin. But that would be rescinding the rights on LeBron, rescinding the rights on Rui, rescinding the rights on Luke, rescinding the rights on Jackson, rescinding the rights on, there's one more, Maxey. That one I think will happen. The other four, though, like with Jackson, he's outplayed his contract. With Luke, he's fit in nicely. And then there's LeBron, who's been the face of the franchise for 7 of the past 8 seasons. And then there's Rui, who the Lakers have championed as like one of their findings and is someone who has a lot of supporters in that front office. How many of those guys are they actually rescinding the rights for? Like I could see LeBron and them, that potentially just, the parting of ways there. But I would not be surprised or shocked if they kept Rui. I would not be surprised or shocked if they kept Kennard or Jackson Hayes. Jackson Hayes is now part of the Slovenian national team. They had the Luka birthday cake celebration tonight. It said Slove Lakers, and like Jackson's a Slove Laker, technically. So a lot of key decisions here. I am open to keeping Kennard, but I think it really depends on what the options are. And I also say this with like one caveat. And I want a larger sample size with this and just how everything plays out. But my one thing is, if you are truly building around Luka and Austin, I think at least in the top 9, which I would assume Kennard is probably in the top 9, definitely top 10, but probably top 9 of like next year's theoretical rotation. I think ideally, if you, to me, Luke Kennard's more of like in an ideal role, an ideal like championship level team. He is more of a 9th man or even a 10th man. I don't think he's in a top, like, again, if you put him on OKC, he's not even, I don't even think he's sniffing the rotation. Put him on San Antonio, I don't think he's in the top 8. Same thing. Minnesota doesn't have great depth, so Minnesota might be an exception there. Houston, same thing, not in the rotation. Denver, same thing. I think he's a fringe rotation player there. So I do think the Lakers should ideally be building toward Luke being more of a fringe rotation player than like a rotation mainstay, which is why my preference would probably be more of like a minimum contract for him, or maybe you're splitting that room exception. Like maybe you split the room exception between Kennard and Jackson, and it's some split of like they both get 4.5, one of them gets 5, one of them gets 4, so it's like more than a minimum, something like that. I'd be okay with that, and you're also then you're getting 2 for the price of 1, right? But my point with Kennard and like whether he's 9th or 10th, I think if you're building with Luka and Austin, you basically need the other 7 to 8 primary rotation guys to be plus defenders. I don't think you can afford to build a Luka Austin rotation with championship aspirations where even like one of the guys is a questionable defender to the degree that Kennard is. So he's such a good shooter that like maybe that's like the one exception. But then you have to nail the rest of the rotation. Like every single player needs to be a clear positive defensively. Otherwise, your defensive floor is going to be too low. So that would be my one thing with Kennard is like, I've liked it so far. And as I noted tonight, like there's been a lot to like with him offensively and his fit. I just think like extrapolating this out into like an ideal roster build, ideally you have like 2, I mean, you have the Gafford Lively center rotation from Dallas. And then the rest, you have 2 3-and-D wings next to Luka and Austin, 1 bigger wing, 1 smaller wing. And then your bench is that center, and then another couple of big wings, and like maybe 1 scoring offensive type guard that ideally can like hold their own defensively a little bit. It's an ambitious checklist, but I'm not quite sure where Kennard fits in all of that. I think it's again, if you want to keep him, that's okay. But then I don't know how I feel. Like then I don't like Rui in the rotation as much, right? Like I think at some point you got to make some concessions of you can't just keep adding like defensively challenged players into your ideal rotation. So I think that's just something the Lakers have to navigate. But in general, especially for the right price, like I don't think I'd want to pay him more than like $4 or $5 million. And I, at least B-Ball Index does their contract stuff. Like he's been a net negative actually in terms of his contract versus his production. I think there's always context with that and like how Atlanta used him this season, for example. But I think if you could get him on a discount on a team-friendly deal, I'm open to it. I would not want to pay him $9 million. I would not want to pay him double-digit million. I think that would be a mistake. Jay Spares, thank you for the super chat. Bad team, but good to see Big Three work. Who's had the best NBA coverage in your opinion this year, Jovan? I'm so out on ESPN. The shtick is just so old. Are we talking like TV coverage? Because I would say I'll give you multiple answers. So I would say from like the broadcast perspective, I think NBC has done the best job, and just some of their packaging and some of like the background stuff they do to hype up the matchups that they have. But I just really like their broadcast and their announcers and just the feel of it. I feel like is like a breath of fresh air, and it feels like they're enjoying basketball and celebrating basketball and like packaging it in a special way. In terms of studio show, I think Amazon and what they've done with their studio show has been awesome. I like them sitting on the couch. I like the like sort of casual feel, but then they also have the heavy hitters of Nowitzki and Nash and Wade and Blake Griffin, and then they'll bring on Zach Lowe, and they also have the court there where they'll do some stuff. I know TNT has done stuff like that. ESPN has done stuff like that. But I think they do some breakdowns and stuff with analytics and court mapping and like different things that I think is a bit higher level than that. And I've really enjoyed Amazon's studio show and the like pre and post and like they've had some fun interview moments with people. I don't think NBC's has been quite there. And then in terms of like podcasting and who covers the league, I still think Zach Lowe is the gold standard. I really like Tim Legler, who is sort of a hybrid because he obviously is calling the games for ESPN, but he's a frequent guest with Lowe or Simmons, or he's got the All NBA show with Adam Mares. And then I would also give a shout out to my teammate, Jason Timpf, for his NBA coverage on Hoops Tonight. I think he has a really tough job just covering the league as in depth as he does. And he's churning out content on a daily basis and reacting to the biggest news and games of the night. So I would also give Jason a much deserved shout out. Trev Gamer, thank you for the super chat. Reason LD fans are mad is that the Slanderers don't know and didn't watch him in Dallas. Give him a center, watch him get 3 threes and 3 lob dunks in the first quarter and demoralize teams. Most fun player to watch in the league. I agree. Now, like that's why I have remained so bullish on Luka, and I've made this point before, but before the Luka trade even happened, I was asked for like my top 5, who are the top 5 players in the NBA. And again, no inclination Luka was about to be a Laker. I said I had him second in the league behind Jokic, and and that was coming off of Jokic's last MVP, and like I still think the consensus is like he's the best player in the world. But like, just point being, like, I think there was like a clear, like, Jokic is the best player in the league. And then there was some debate. Is it Luka? Is it Giannis? Is it Shea? Like, Shea was on the ascent. He ended up winning MVP and finals MVP. OKC won the title. But this was like midpoint of last year. I said I thought Luka was the second best player in the league. And I really, frankly thought that until like Shea went out and won MVP and won the title. And then it was kind of, difficult to, like, Shea's on the NBA mountaintop right now, and he's probably going to win a second MVP. But I'm with you. Like, I also, like, so I covered the Clippers before I covered the Lakers, and I had a front row seat to Luka ripping the heart out of the Clippers and his first playoff experience in the bubble. And then, I mean, we've just seen, like, he's a playoff riser. I think his teams pretty much have maxed their potential. We could argue, like, the exception of the Lakers last year, and that was an incomplete roster around Luka. I mean, at the end of the series, there was 5 guys that were playing that JJ trusted. So, a lot of that was like the roster, and they didn't have the requisite time to build it out around Luka. But I would argue, with the exception of last year, you look at basically every Luka postseason, that the team met or exceeded expectations. And even, I would say, like, exceeded expectations where, like, several series where it's like the team is most people are projecting like a 5-game like a lot of those Clippers series, the consensus was Clippers are going to win this in 5, or even Clippers might sweep, and then Dallas pushed them to 6, pushed them to 7, and so I think if you give him the right pieces, he will maximize it. Now, I don't think that means he's absolved of any criticism, right? Like, there are certainly things he can do better in terms of the shot selection, the defensive consistency. I do think he's a better defender than people give him credit for. I think he's a much better defender than people give him credit for. That doesn't mean he's perfect defensively. That doesn't mean he tries every possession. That doesn't mean he doesn't get blown by sometimes, doesn't get back in transition. Like, there are things he could be better with. That I think the turnovers, shot pass decision making, it's not been statistically like his best season, right? Like, I think that 2023-24 season was his best season up to date. This one, you could probably, I would say, is up there for like second or third best season of his career. But I think we can say 2 things are true. Like, Luka can still be better and still has more, and not even be better in terms of like us, like, putting this idea of like what Luka should be. It's like what we've seen from Luka. Like, I don't think currently this is the best version of Luka we've seen in his time in the NBA. I think he could still be, we've seen a better version in the past, and I think he's capable of getting back to that. But you could also definitely say the Lakers have not built the right Luka roster. And I mean, they basically ran back. Like, I was just criticizing last year's roster. They basically ran that back, added a few pieces. And like, if you think about it, DeAndre Ayton, Marcus Smart, and Jake LaRavia, I think you could argue like Marcus is kind of like Marcus would have fit on that Dallas team. I think Jake would have probably been like a borderline rotation guy if he played for them. DA did not fit, of course, to the level of like Gafford and Lively. But it is kind of funny in retrospect thinking about the Lakers clearly did not have the right Luka team last year. They basically ran it back. And then they added some pieces that, like, I think one piece fit with him, and Marcus and Luka have been great together, in terms of their 2-man lineup data. A piece that didn't really fit in DA, and then a piece that was, kind of a fringy rotation piece in Jake. So they just didn't really make the changes to the roster that they needed to make. And this is to your point. But I agree. I think if you give him the right center and the right pieces, we will now, can the Lakers build that roster is an entirely different question. And that's a question that'll be answered this summer. Gary Singh, thank you for the super chat. Ayton just got to play hard, stop caring about shots when he's active. When he's active, changes Lakers' potential. Luka surprised me on defense, has held his own. Yeah, or Luka has helped. Oh. The Luka continues to throw me off. Luka surprised me on defense, has held his own. I'm a little bit more down on Luke's defense. Like, I think I've made this comparison before, and I promise it's not just because they're both undersized white guards. There's some Austin in there in terms of like I think Austin is largely trying and in the right spot, but at the end of the day, Austin is 6'5", 200 pounds, and most of the guys he's matched up with are either much quicker than him or much stronger or much more athletic or some combination of those, two of those or like all three of them, right? So Austin is almost always at a physical disadvantage in like any serious defensive matchup. It's the same thing with Luke. Like I talked about, especially offensively, he is pretty quick. And I would say like quicker than the average like shooter type, where you think of those guys as more so just shooters and catch and shoot guys, but he could put the ball on the floor, get to the rim, finish. But I mean, if he's around a big man, the big man is going to get a high percentage look or get a rebound, or even like a big wing. So I think he has been in largely the right spots within the team scheme, and like, the Lakers switch a lot, so he'll have to get switched on guys. But I think he's been scored on quite a lot and has like made the Lakers' defensive challenges a little bit tougher. Now, again, I think like the process and like what he's not, I don't think he's like some guy who's like aloof defensive. Like Ayton is aloof defensively and sometimes checked out and in outer space. Luke is not like that. Luke is attentive. He just is limited physically in a way that like ultimately, you can be trying, but if you're not getting the results, that does make you a defensive liability. So I would still contend that he is a defensive liability, and that will ultimately like affect his role in the playoffs. But we'll see how the Lakers can try to hide him. They just also they've tried to hide LeBron, they've tried to hide Luka, they've tried to hide Austin, like they've tried to hide Rui. There's only so many guys you could hide within a defensive scheme. And so that's just tough there. But I'm with you on Ayton. It's just, I don't have confidence he's going to do that consistently. Tommen, thank you for the super chat. Summer move, DK, Vando, 2026 pick, 2032 pick, unprotected pick, and swap for Herb Jones. iHeart for 2 years, $46 million. Watson, 4 years, $110 million. Hayes, Luke, Time Lord, minimum. Rui for 2 for 35. Austin, 4 for 145. Okay, a lot to unpack here. So that's 2 first-round picks and a swap for Herb Jones plus DK and Vando. So I think the argument here is that DK and Vando are both, like, nobody wants DK. The Lakers tried to trade him at the deadline desperately. They could not move him. They didn't move him in the Gabe deal. Vando is still, he's got 2 more years left. It's a net negative contract, and you would have to attach an asset. So you could argue you're basically trading a pick and a swap for Herb Jones, and then you're adding in, because you're getting off Vando, you add in an extra pick to get off Vando. It's a steep price. I don't know that the Lakers would pay this, but I would consider it. It is like, I really like Herb Jones. And again, like, people see the 2 picks and they're like, that's an overpay for Herb Jones. I agree. But I think the context here is it's actually a pick plus a swap for Herb Jones. And then it's an unprotected pick to get off Vando, which will open up. So if you, the most common cap situation I've talked about has been DK and Vando on the books, which would give the Lakers about $57 million in cap space. You take both those guys off, that opens up an extra, $15, almost $16 million. So now you get to like 72 in cap space, but you're adding in Herb Jones, who is making, I believe, $21 million next season, thereabouts. Let's see. Herb is making, so he's still got 1 more year left on his prior contract before the extension kicks in 2027-28. So Herb's only making 15 next year. So I guess that would basically be a wash, and you'd still have the 57. Now with iHeart, this is assuming that the Thunder decline his option, they could also accept his option and then trade him. So there's no, I also think, to me, Dort is more expendable than iHeart. I think Caruso and Wallace are both just straight up better than Dort. They also now have AJ Mitchell. They still have Wiggins and Isaiah Joe. Like they have, I mean, and now I think Wallace has been taking a step recently. So like they have a plethora of perimeter talent. What is a little bit shakier for them is it's like Hartenstein, Chet, and Jalen Williams. I think Jalen Williams is a fine backup, but I would not want to lose Isaiah Hartenstein and what he brings with like the Twin Towers look. So I'm more of the mind. I think Dort is going to be the guy who's more available than iHeart, but we'll see. 2 years, 46. I think that's fine. So that's 23. So now you have 34 left or so. Watson 110. So that's what, like 27-ish, just under 28 for Watson. So you have $7 million left. So then you have the 3 minimum guys, which is fine. You can have 3 minimum guys. Here's where we get into the part that I don't think is going to be feasible. Rui, 2 years, 35. To get that $57 million cap space that we just talked about, to get Hartenstein and to get Watson, Rui has to have his rights rescinded. And so what that means is, because Rui's got a giant cap hold. Rui's cap hold is almost $30 million. So actually the $57 million we're talking about is partly contingent on Rui's, the Lakers rescinding the rights to Rui. So what that means is if they rescind the rights to Rui, they can no longer go over the cap to keep Rui and pay him a raise on his current contract. So point being, they would have, under this theoretical construction here, they would have $7 million to offer Rui. They would not be able to go over the cap with Rui. If they kept Rui and his rights, even if they gave him a discount, that would eat into the cap space. So just already, if you're keeping Rui on, you're keeping the rights to Rui, cut that cap space from 57 to like 28, because I think he's at 29 million. If you sign him to, let's just say here, you're saying like 17 and a half average annual value, that's still taking 17 million off of the 57, which gets you to 40 million, and you're spending 23 on Hartenstein and 27, 28 on Watson. You don't have that money to spend on those guys. That money's gone. So point being, you'd have to pick between Hartenstein, Watson, and Rui. I think the choice is obvious. I would rank them Watson, Hartenstein, Rui. I think you could debate Hartenstein, Watson, but I think Rui's the casualty here. You just don't have the space for Rui. And then I will say 4 years, 145 for Austin. So that's what, about 35-ish average annual value. I think that's on the lows. Like, because one thing with Austin's number that is going to be interesting is like what the average annual value ends up being, because let's say he gets 35 the first year, it's going to be increasing. It's going to actually be like 35, 37 and a half, 39, 39 and a half, and then like 41 or so on like a 4-year deal. So this, if you're saying 145, that's actually probably closer to Austin starting at like a $30 million salary than going up like, 31 and a half, 33 and a half, and then ending at like 35, or maybe it's like, 30, 32, 34, 36, whatever. It kind of averages out to 35. I think that's kind of low for a starting point. I'd be pretty surprised if, I think his lowest starting point is probably going to be like 33 and then work its way up, but we'll see. So I think the Austin number might be a little bit low, but definitely, I mean, that would be, I think, a bargain for the Lakers, and that would be a win for the Lakers if you could get him like that much lower than his max. I also think they would sign him to a 5-year deal, not a 4-year deal, but maybe Austin pushes for 4+1 or 3+1 if they want a discount. So he has some flexibility there. But point being with this, I like where your head's at. I like this. Like in the hypothetical, you have Hartenstein, Herb Jones, and Watson all as starters, plus Luka and Austin. Off the bench, you have Smart, Hayes, Luke, Time Lord, and then you would also have LaRavia. I I like that. I like that team a lot. You would not be able to keep Rui as well. And this is where I try to keep harping on, like, when I see people's potential offseason plans, there's a lot of ambition, and I get it. The Lakers need a lot of things. They need a lot of moves, and they have a lot of roster needs, but they're actually a bit more limited than I think people think. And especially like just with iHeart and Watson, you're basically blowing through the cap space. So, and that's assuming like maybe OKC just refuses to waive him or decline the option and be like, hey, iHeart's available, but you got to take him at the $30 million. And then if you did iHeart at 30 and Watson at 27, that's the entire cap space with 2 players. So just something to keep in mind when we talk about the offseason. Damian, thank you for the super chat. Morning, Brate. Is it time to walk away from DA? His effort is just not there, and looking forward to the draft. Who would you pick, 3-and-D type or a center? I mean, I think it's time to walk away from him in the summer, although he has a player option, so that's out of the Lakers' control. I think the appropriate action here is just to move him to the bench and have him be more in like it's kind of in some ways some of the similar things to Rui in terms of the argument for Rui coming off the bench of like, can DA be in some of these bench? Because DA, if you think about it, a lot of times, like, I mean, there's been some differences lately because there have been some shifts where he's come in, back earlier, but he plays a lot with the starters or like the core of the starting group, and that has its pros and cons. But one of the cons, like, it has its pros in terms of like he's just in better lineups, and that actually makes some of his lineup data a bit concerning because he's often with at least like a couple of the Lakers' best players. But the con is like he's just not as involved offensively in some of those groupings, where if it's like LeBron, Ayton, and Banshees, like if it's, let's just say like LeBron, Ayton, Jake, Vando, and I guess Marcus, because the Lakers don't really have another small like defensive guard, then DA could be more featured. But I think as the current construction, he's just kind of phased out of the rotation, phased out of the offense a bit too much. Although I would also argue like he doesn't fight for post position consistently. He doesn't finish those shots consistently. So I think in the offseason, or like the soonest they can move on from him, I would at this point. He's not the center of the future. And in terms of the draft, I would say I default to 3-and-D type just because I think you can't, and like true 3-and-D type, because like even a guy like Adu, while I like the draft pick, it was like, I mean, Adu has like a lot of similarities to Vando. I think he's more polished offensively than Vando, but like still the same general complaint or just like limitation of he can't really shoot, and he's a relatively limited offensive player. We've seen him stretch his wings a bit in the G League, but there is a difference between doing that. Kobe Buffkin's dropping 41 in the G League. He comes into the NBA and like, it's just a difference, right? Like, so I would say by default, if you can get a 3-and-D guy, I always want a 3-and-D guy. But if there is a center prospect who, like, I would say best available between those two positional archetypes. What I will definitively say though is no guards, nobody under 6'7", no more small guys, no more defensive liabilities. It needs to be like an athletic, rim running, rim protecting, above the rim center, or it needs to be a 3-and-D guy like 6'6" and above, who is a high 30s or above 3-point shooter in college or internationally, wherever he's coming from, and like a multi-positional defender. One of those two archetypes. I do not want a point guard. I do not want a combo guard who's like 6'4" and is a questionable defender. Get that shit out of here. I don't want that. So apologize for my language, but that's how I feel about the draft. I'm tired of no DK or JHS. Sarah Talks Ball, thank you for the super chat. DA just doesn't seem motivated by public shaming. I agree. But it's like at some point it's like you either do it or you don't. And like, you can't be entirely dependent on external motivation. And if you are, then frankly, you shouldn't be in the NBA. I think that's like kind of a blank, like, look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that like facing criticism and like these guys, I mean, he turned off his Instagram comments recently. Like I have a fraction of the fame that any of these guys have or notoriety or whatever. And like, I've gotten it with death threats. I've gotten it, people commenting on my wife's Instagram. I've gotten it, people commenting on my physical appearance, people commenting on my ethics as a journalist, people commenting on my podcast, whatever. I've gotten criticism across the spectrum, and it has bothered me. Like, at this point, I have a thick skin, and like it doesn't bother me as much as it used to. But like, those things bother you, right? So I don't want to take away the human element here with DA of like, of course, it would stink to have all the jokes and things that have been said about him over the last 24, 36 hours. And like, I get the human side, but at the same time, it's like, if an article and like people saying you're not Clint Capella is going to like force you to retreat internally and be like a shell of yourself and not perform, like, I think you just have to be mentally tougher. Like there's really no way around that. And as harsh as that might sound, it's like, I mean, this year was supposed to be about proving everything in Phoenix and Portland was not true about him. And he did that. He was on his best behavior for the first 6 or 7 weeks. And then now we have this 8-week sample size where he's been back to being unreliable, low motor, missing layups, missing dunks, missing free throws, missing floaters, visibly pouting, just not trying that hard. Some of the stuff in the media, it's like at some point you can't keep hand holding. He's just got to do it. And if anything, I agree with you. Like the public shaming this clearly seems to backfire with him, but it's like that he's just going to continue to face this if he does not buck this trend that he's now had kind of with him for like his entire career, but you could at least argue since like post finals run with Phoenix. So I mean, that's the crazy thing for me is like I've talked about this before. After the Lakers lost to the Suns in 2021, The Athletic put me on the Suns beat for the rest of the playoffs because we didn't have a Suns beat writer. They were unfortunately let go during COVID. And so I saw like the best basketball of DeAndre Ayton's career. I thought he defended Jokic. Like, Dwight Howard 2020 Western Conference Finals will always be like the pinnacle of defense against Jokic. I think DA is I think the job he did against Jokic in 2021 was better than the job AD did against Jokic in 2023 or in 2024. And I say that as someone who loves AD and continues to think he's underappreciated from like a historical context. But like DA was a beast back then. And like Jokic wasn't this version of Jokic to I guess be fair to AD. Like 2023, 2024, he was different than 2021. But I thought DA like played him pretty well. And he was a beast as a finisher and, the occasional post up and mid-range jumper and stuff. I've seen what the best version of DeAndre Ayton looks like up close and personal and, in the locker room and, all that stuff. But it's not been this season and it's unfortunate. Bosnian Bear, thank you for the super chat. Yo, brate, do you think any team will be stupid enough to offer all the questions about Ayton, to offer Ayton a new deal so we are not stuck with him for one more year? I think he's got to play better. I think that there was a point, I would say up until like late December, kind of around that Christmas point, where to me it was a no-brainer. He's going to opt out, and whether it's with the Lakers or another team, get some sort of you could argue even him as a backup in certain situations could make sense in that like $10 to $15 million range. Like could have made sense. I'm talking past tense now, where I was like, he's going to opt out and he's going to get some type of deal of could he get a 3-year, $36 million deal, 4-year, 48, 4-year, 50, something like that, where he's making like 12 to 14 million. And that might have even been low with like his production at that time. I mean, it wasn't too long ago. He was averaging like 16 and 11 on really efficient shooting, but that is often not, or that has clearly not been how he has played over the past couple months. And I would say that his value and perception has gone back to, like, I would also say, in at least talking to people at the time, there was still a lot of people being like skeptical of Ayton. Like, his perception around the league has not been positive. It was not positive when the Lakers signed him. Like, there was a lot of people saying the Lakers are going to regret this. This is going to be a mistake. And like, those people I think have ultimately been more proven right than the people who are optimistic about it. But I would say probably not right now, unless a lot of things change over the next like month and a half. I think he's got to play much better to close the regular season and in the playoffs. I think like the playoffs are the big thing here, where even if the Lakers lose in round one, but he has like a valiant effort and a big series, that can rehab his value, where some team will talk themselves into him potentially as like a backup center. And I think the price of backup centers these days, like good backup centers, can be in that like $10 to $15 million range. Like we just saw what Luke Cornett got from San Antonio. So maybe some team talks themselves into that. But outside of that, I mean, I would not want to commit to him being my starting center. And if you actually look through, like if we go through the league here quickly, like not OKC, not San Antonio, not Houston, not Denver, not Minnesota, not Phoenix. Golden State is sort of interesting, but I don't think he fits their like stylistic identity. Like they could use a center, but I don't think it's I mean, they got Porzingis now, but obviously it's unclear like how long term that's going to be. Portland, no. Clippers, no. Memphis, no. Dallas, no. New Orleans, no. Utah, no. Sacramento, maybe, just because they're Sacramento. Detroit, no. Boston, no. Knicks, no. Cavs, no. Raptors, no. Sixers, no. Magic, no. Heat, no. Hornets, no. Hawks, no. Bucks, no. Bulls, maybe. Wizards, no. Nets, maybe, depending on what happens with Claxton. Pacers, no. So I just named like 3 teams that you could theoretically argue he could make like some sense as like a discount starting center. But even then, I can like the Kings shouldn't pursue him, and they obviously already have Sabonis, but they might blow it all up this summer. Then the Nets just as like a way station, maybe, and the Bulls as like a way station, maybe. But none of those teams would be doing this for like competitive purposes, is my point here. So I think the Lakers are probably stuck with him and are going to have to try and trade him. Alma, thank you for the super chat. Hi, Jovan. Do you think we cut the dead weight, DA, DK, et cetera, this offseason, ideally package up for an upgrade, but we're hardly asset rich? Kind of depressing seeing who we could have drafted instead of DK. Yeah, I mean, the DK, like, I mean, I'll tell, I've shared this before, so I'm not breaking news here, but I know for a fact that the 2 guys the Lakers were strongly considering at number 17 were Tristan da Silva and Yves Missi. And they ended up passing on both those guys because DK fell. But DK fell in part because of his age. He's about to be 25. And because of his defense. And so there was a reason why a lot of teams were out on him, and the Lakers decided to take advantage. But remember, like, the Lakers didn't interview him. They didn't work him out. He was not really in consideration because they thought he was going to be a lottery pick. But if you think about what the Lakers, like, yes, the Lakers have needed more shooting, but they also, if we go back in time to 2024, coming off of the 2024 first round series, they could have easily used the Tristan da Silva or Missi type. They passed on both and they got DK. To your point, you don't just get to dump stuff without assets. So the Lakers will have access to a second round pick to trade. So they'll have a couple second round picks to trade. They'll have the 3 firsts, with the asterisk with, two firsts and a drafted player, we'll say, most likely, unless they agree to something on draft day. And then you got the swaps. So, I think ideally you try to package these guys together. You could throw Vando in there as like arguably some dead weight. I think it's probably DA, DK, and Vando. There's some, depending on how they feel about Kobe Buffkin and Bronny, they could waive both those guys. So Kobe Buffkin has a team option. Bronny is non-guaranteed. So they could just cut those two guys if they want a couple extra roster spots. But with DA and DK, I don't think you're just trading that. Like, you're attaching at least a second, if not potentially more. And because again, like, teams have been, I think, reluctant to do these types of dumps in the summer. I think they're more open to it closer to the trade deadline. But for the Lakers, obviously, then you're going like 50 games with some dead weight on your cap sheet. I think a more realistic thing here would be if LA does one of these trades in the summer for a Hartenstein, for a Herb Jones, for a Lou Dort, for whoever, can you find a way to slide in one of these guys? Now, that team is going to be trying to get off money and cut, and the Lakers have the cap space to just absorb those contracts into the cap space and not send anything out. So, maybe that's a haggling thing, but if there's any way to send one of those guys out and maybe they get waived and then they go somewhere else, I think that would be an ideal outcome for LA. But to your point, they don't have a lot of assets to attach. It would be great if they had like 6 second round picks, because then it'd be like, all right, here's DK and a second, here's maybe a second or two with DA, and like get off these contracts, and that would be nice. But that's just not really realistic. Zach Wan, thank you for the super chat. Can you make a vid of role players that fit Luka best? From there, which Lakers players fit the role and which free agent realistic target can fill the remaining role? I really like this idea. I think this is more of an off-season situation in terms of like video breakdowns of who has fit really well next to Luka, go back to the Dallas days, and then even some of the LA days. Like I think Jackson has fit well. I think Marcus has fit well. I think DFS fit well, though he obviously played with Luka in Dallas as well. So I like this idea. I think this is a really good idea. And I think it could be a series. Like that's already been something I've been thinking about. Is people liked my player breakdown videos or the scouting reports over the summer, where after Marcus and DA and Jake were brought on, I did a like 20 to 30 minute video breakdown for each player and their strengths and weaknesses. And it would be fun to go look back at that, at how accurate I was now that we have a larger sample size with those players. But that was obviously like watched a bunch of film and talked to people, and it was more so based on like their previous stops, obviously, rather than what they were going to do for the Lakers. But I like this idea, and I think I do want to do more film stuff. Like I've talked about it. YouTube demonetizes it, so that's been like, I'm still in, I think the mode of like trying to figure out what type of content I want to do additionally outside of like the post game stuff. So I've probably been slacking a little bit on the film stuff. I apologize, but I really like this idea, and that will be an off-season project for me. Keon Park, thank you for the super chat. Do you see AR taking $22.9 million extension over a new $35+ million contract if he messes up the rest of the season and the playoffs? And if he takes extension, does that help to get other higher pieces? I'll answer the second question first. No, it does not, because Austin so there's these things, I've already referenced it throughout the show. There's these things called cap holds, where for pending free agents, the NBA and like the CBA ascribes a certain dollar amount based on your contract and your rights, and there's a lot of factors that go into it. But that is on your cap sheet as a basically like contract projection for that player for next season. So for example, Austin's making his 14 point whatever this season. His cap hold for next year is 20.9. Rui's making his 18.5. His cap hold is almost $29 million. It's in the high 20s. So I think it's based on like years of service and like there's a lot of things that go into it. But point being, if you don't rescind the rights to the player, and if you rescind the rights, then that means they are off your cap sheet, but then you don't have the bird rights and the ability to go over the cap, and like that's a big appeal, of keeping the rights. Then then they're just a free agent and they could sign it anywhere, but you could only use cap space then to re-sign them. So the appeal of keeping them on the cap hold is the ability to have the bird rights and then go over the cap. So point being, with Austin, his cap hold is 20.9 million. So that's actually less than that extension and less than his projected new contract. So the best order of operations for the Lakers with Austin is actually to keep Austin on his cap hold, do other moves with more cap space, and then once they've done the other moves, sign Austin a little bit later into the offseason. And I assume they will immediately reach out to him. They will have the conversation. They'll have the back and forth. They'll have the negotiation. They will agree to some sort of term. And maybe it's even contingent on like, if you can go get a star or a couple starters, whatever, I'll take a slight discount. If you can't, then I want like X amount, and like they can kind of haggle on that. But they're going, like, it's going to benefit them to keep Austin on his cap hold before re-signing him, so they have that flexibility. The inverse is Rui, where Rui's cap hold of 29 or it's in the high 20s. That's higher than Rui's going to get. So it actually, if the Lakers are going to keep Rui, it would actually make more sense to sign Rui immediately to a new contract, because if Rui's making, say, 16 million instead of the projected, the cap hold of 27, 29, whatever it is, that's like a pretty big difference of 10 to 12 million or so. So the order of operations matters here, but with Austin, I do not. Austin, again, I feel for some people, I know they're pulling their hair out hearing me talk about Austin and the contract. Like, Austin is getting 30 million, whether it's from the Lakers or someone else. Now, the 35, the 40, the max of 42.5, that will be determined by his play over the rest of the season and the playoffs. But there are teams that could pay Austin $30 million. There's also teams that, like the Clippers are a team that could pay Austin $30 million. And like, if I'm the Clippers, I'd rather have Austin than Darius Garland. I think Austin's a better player than Darius Garland. He's also healthier and more available than Darius Garland. And like, you could obviously sign him and then figure out the Garland part of it. But there are teams that can make moves to create cap space if they need to. And if Austin is available and the market is 30 million and it's not 40 million, there will be multiple suitors. I am sure of that. So I really see Austin's floor at, if like he craps the bed the rest of the season and has a bad playoffs, he's still going to walk into 30 million. I like the totality of a season and what he did pre-LeBron coming back, I think will carry weight with a lot of people. And he still is perceived as like a player that is on the ascent and I think could fit into a lot of systems. So again, I'm not saying he's getting the max. The max is 42.5. I think like that is starting to look like it is less likely, at least based on the recent performance post-injury. But I think it's a big drop off to like 30. And I think, as I said, going back to when we first started talking about this in February last year, when people started to ask about Austin's contract, I said then 30 plus million. I've remained consistent in that. There have been times it's looked like it might be the max or might be 40. There's some leeway there, but he's getting 30 plus. I would bet any amount of money or anything on that. Gary Singh, thank you for the super chat. What do the Lakers do with the 2026 pick if they can't get Giannis? Do you just draft? What type of player or package the pick for a role player? 2 separate deals. Depends what's out there. I think about, again, like, is Dort or Hartenstein a possibility? Is Herb Jones a possibility? Some type of impact, starting level, defensive-minded role player who fits with Luka and Austin. That's the type of guy I target. If you do draft, though, as I said with an earlier answer, I think you got to go 3-and-D wing or center. Those are the 2 clear needs with this roster. A longer-term center that is better than Jackson and DA, and then a actual 2-way wing who can contribute on both sides of the ball. Those are the 2 position. Like, they probably need 2 new centers and like multiple 2-way wings. So getting one of those guys in the draft would be great. Now, I mean, if they trade it, it just depends on who's available, what's the price. I will note that everyone's going to want the future Laker picks and bet against the Lakers in the future than like the 2026 pick, because 2026 right now would be what? They have the so there's actually 9 teams that have a better record than the Lakers right now. So they'd have like the 21st pick, I believe, if my math is okay, 20th, 21st pick. So, I mean, that's a solid draft spot. It's not the best draft spot, but you're still there, like middle of the pack outside the lottery. Has some value, but I think people are going to want the 2031 or 33 pick. So it'll be interesting to see how the Lakers haggle with that. That's even assuming like some of these guys might go for picks. Like, I think Herb would go for a pick. Hardenstein and Dort, you could argue you're doing the Thunder a favor. So like you should be getting something out of it, but then they'd probably argue they're giving you a starter. So it's like that negotiation between, potential negotiation between the Thunder and Lakers will be interesting. Keon Park, thank you for the super chat. If somehow LA gets Giannis to pair with Luka, AR would probably think he could get traded next deadline if he gets a new contract. Do you think AR would not make a new contract with LA to choose his next team, or still get money, then go wherever LA sends him? I think he would want to stay in LA and would want to get the most money possible. So if LA is offering him the best opportunity and the best money, I think it's a no-brainer. So I think, but I would say this is a false dichotomy in that, like, I think there are more choices than just these two, or like more outcomes and nuance within the conversation than just these two. But I think in general, I'm fairly confident that, again, unless things go completely off the rails and like there's like this giant dissonance between the two sides, Austin's going to stay in LA. He wants to be in LA. He wants to resign. He wants his money, but I think there's going to be some room there for a discount or like maybe a lower figure. We'll see. But I think he would rather stay in LA, and then, I mean, obviously then they have the power to trade him, but I don't really like it, unless they, I guess the only way I could see this going south or sour would be if the Lakers come to Austin and say, hey, would you want to go to Milwaukee in a sign and trade for Giannis? That might be something that potentially upsets him and rubs him the wrong way and is like, no, I don't want to do that. Or maybe he does, but then you're not having Austin, right? But I think it would more likely like upset him and potentially push him into a direction of, is there another option? Is there another team out there? So if you're the Lakers, you got to be careful how you handle that. But in general, I think Austin's going to stay. And I continue to say the best course of action with Austin, outside of potentially signing and trading him for Giannis, but again, you have to get his permission, I think is just retain the asset and then flip it. It's something the Lakers are not good at, but retain the asset, then flip it. All right, going 5 more years left. 5 more years left. I was thinking about contracts. 5 more minutes. It is the the front end of a back-to-back. So I will be back in less than 24 hours or thereabout. Jay says, Jovan, if you had to place a bet on it, what current Laker do you think is on the squad next year? Luka. Now, on the current team, I would say Luka, Austin, Jake, Adu, and then I'm not as confident on anybody else. If we go through the list quickly, DA's got the player option, and I don't think is going to love LA's offseason center plans. Kobe Buffkin team option, that's like TBD in terms of just like where he's at. Rui, free agent, but he eats into the Lakers cap space if they want to acquire starting level players. Jackson, I think there's like a high likelihood he's back, but I just think there's, again, he's probably, he's a potential casualty. I would say I might throw Jackson in there. I might say Luka, Austin, Jackson, Jake, and Adu are probably the 5 guys I have confidence in. Bronny, I think it just depends on how LA feels about him this offseason. He does have a non-guarantee. LeBron, that one, of course, is just up in the air right now if he's even playing. Luke Kennard, I think there's a decent chance he's back, but it depends on what type of contract he wants. Maxey, I could see as a back-end roster guy on a minimum just because of the relationship with Luka, but the Lakers also got to be careful. You don't want dead weight on the roster. Dalton, I think they're going to do they're going to try their hardest to get off of that. Magnon, I don't really see the future there. Marcus, I think it depends. Like I talked about using the room exception to keep Luke and Jackson potentially. You could also use that to keep Marcus, because I think at this point, Marcus making $5 million, you see like Guy Santos just got a 3-year, $15 million deal. Like Marcus Smart, I think, is a low double-digit million guy. Like I think Marcus could go get like a 2-year, $24 million deal next summer. So, or this summer. So whether that's from the Lakers or whether that's from someone else, I think that's TBD. But I could see Marcus potentially leaving for more money. Nick Smith, you don't really see it. Drew Timme, maybe he sticks around as a back-end roster guy or two-way guy. And then Vando probably will be on next year's roster. I just think that the Lakers will likely look to get off of that. But I guess if I had to add a 6th player, Vando's the other guy who's probably in the mix. Goat him. So same roster minus Braun. I mean, that's the disaster scenario for LA here, is that LeBron just retires or leaves and they basically have the same roster just without LeBron, which I know for some people are going to say that's better. I don't think I don't necessarily agree. Like, I understand the limitations with the big 3 and how those 3 have struggled together, but in general, just not having LeBron. That said, I think the Lakers are going to add a player or add a couple of impact players. I think they need more than just a couple additional, impact players. Cole notes Jackson has a small cap hold. They can go over the cap to keep him. True. I just, like, for example, just when I say like the 57 million, his cap hold is more than like, so the way it works is if you're under, I think it's under 14 players, or maybe it's under 12, you get, it might be under 12. I'm actually going to have Eric Pincus. I've talked about this. I'm having Eric Pincus on Wednesday, so we'll talk about this with him. But I think it's under 12. You have empty roster charges for each player under 12. So if the Lakers have 6 players, there'd be 6 empty roster charges. Those are usually about 1.1 to 1.2 penciled in. So Jackson's more than that. So when I talk about the 57 in cap space, though, that is with not having Jackson on the books. If you do have Jackson, it's a small amount compared to the empty roster charge, but that might make it closer to $55-54 million. So yeah. Kane Carter says if LA cut Cam and Wood in summer 24, re-signed Prince, signed GTJ, drafted Tristan da Silva, did the DFS trade in the offseason, got Sharp instead of Shake, plus the Luka deal, what happens? Was it realistic? This was all... I think the writing was on the wall with Prince, but they could have... I mean, just because he was going to have such a smaller role with, like if you had GTJ and DFS, like I know DFS would have been later, but like I think Prince would have been marginalized a little bit, but they could have gotten rid of Cam and Wood. They could have signed GTJ for the minimum if they had gotten rid of Cam and Wood. They could have drafted da Silva, and then I've reported this, did not even ask about Day'Ron Sharp and asked about Shake Milton, which was another undersized combo guard. What happens? I mean, I'm not saying they beat. If we add Tristan da Silva, Gary Trent Jr., and Day'Ron Sharp to that first round series, I think they're more competitive. I don't know if that's the difference in them beating Minnesota. Like, I don't know if any of those guys are closing over the LeBron, DFS, Rui, Austin, Luka lineup, right? I mean, you could think about maybe Rui, but like Rui was pretty entrenched in there, and then DFS was holding down the defense and a plus minus beast. So like I think all three of those guys would have played, and especially Gary Trent Jr. The depth would have been better, and maybe they win more games. Maybe they're a different seed. Maybe it's a different first round matchup. I think they would have been more competitive with Minnesota. I don't know if it swings the series entirely, but I think they would have had a better chance to win it. So maybe they even win the series, and then they would have played. Well, they would have played Golden State in round 2. But then if we're doing like the sliding door stuff, Curry got injured in the first half. So is Curry injured? Is he not injured? Then I think they would have definitely lost to OKC in the conference finals, despite how well they played them at the end of the season. I just think OKC leveled up in the playoffs. Adam asks, do you really think we can be a championship team with Austin as the second guy? I'm not sure, to be completely honest. I think they could be a championship team with Austin as the third guy. I also wonder if there's like some builds where, for example, let's just say, I mean, this guy's not going to be on the team, but if you added a Jaren Jackson Jr., like if he had not gotten traded to Utah and he was on the market this summer, the Lakers add him, and it's like, could you maybe argue, like I think Austin's better than Jaren Jackson Jr., but could you argue that like based on the contract and like the overall status, pedigree, hierarchy, he's like the number 2 in the pecking order behind Luka, but like Austin's averaging 24, 25. He's averaging like 18, 19. So like Austin's the number 2 option, but Jaren Jackson Jr. is holding down the defense. And then like he's the third option, but maybe in totality he's their second best player. I think like that's kind of a gray area where I don't know like that distinction there, but I think the proper slotting for Austin with everything I've seen up to this point in his career is a number 3. I think he's a really good number 3. I think he could even be a good number 2. I think he's been a good number 2 at times this season, but with the struggles against some of the best athletic defensive teams, I think that's more, there's some signs that he's probably more of a number 3 than a number 2, but you know, maybe is he a two-way to a better number 2? Like that maybe remains to be seen, but I think the Lakers will need to add another like high level player at least to one of their 3 other starting spots. Where's the balance? I like the old Austin who did the dirty work and didn't care if he came off the bench. Yeah, I mean, I miss, like, he definitely had, what was better defensively and with some of the like, Austin kind of started his career as a banshee, right? Like Austin got on the floor by doing the little things, playing defense. And then I think those things have eroded as he's taken on a larger offensive role and responsibility. With the bench stuff, I just continue to contend that like, I don't, outside of like Cam Thomas, although, it depends on the city. Like there was a time he was starting in Brooklyn, and there was a time he was coming off the bench. Outside of Cam Thomas, like show me the guy averaging 25 a game that's coming off the bench. It just does not happen. I also don't think the Lakers have the talent to reduce Austin's role. But if they had a different roster build, then that's a different conversation. I just don't think this current group has that. But and then Kane Carter, does Rob clear questions before presser begins? Because I'd ask about his b-ball philosophy. What's with the combo guards? Question the lack of 3-and-Ds lopped at bigs. No one asked the juicy stuff. No, that there's no question clearing before these types of things. But I will note, they did not. They kept it to beat writers only for the trade deadline press conference. Adam asks if the Lakers. I don't think they entirely burn the bridge with AD, but I don't think it's in a great place, especially with the current regime. I would imagine that. Well, I got to be careful what I say because sometimes I get aggregated. But yeah, I don't think the AD. I don't think the relationship is in a great place from the AD side right now. Eric asks, Jovan, what do you think about this lineup? Luka, LeBron, Reeves, Smart, Vando. So it's a small ball lineup with the big three. I like it. I like it. I think so. I mean, they've gone with a version of this with Jake instead of Vando, but Vando's obviously a better defender and rebounder than Jake. This is somewhat contingent on Smart being like Smart. I think has been shooting the ball better lately, and I think since January he's just under 40% on threes. So like he has been. We have a sustained stretch here of Smart shooting the ball better, or maybe it's catch and shoot threes, but still, regardless, like he's been shooting the ball better. So I think if he can do that, and then you have Vando as like the one guy who's sort of the offensive liability, but maybe you play 4 in, 1 out. Vando's in the dunker spot, roaming around there, or maybe he's in DHOs and functioning more at like the top. Like I think in this alignment, you got to keep Vando out of the corners because that's where you can cheat off that and like live with Vando taking corner threes, even though he has been shooting it better. You got to be careful. I think it's Vando in the dunker spot or Vando up around the elbows or top of the arc. But yeah, I think for a small ball group, you got the big three and then you got your two best perimeter defenders around them. Now, I also wonder, I really wonder, like this will be something interesting. If the Lakers, I think they'll continue to play small, but I wonder if at some point there's a small ball look that does not feature both of the big three that they close with. And then it's like, who's the guy? Like Luka's going to be closing, but then I think it comes to a point of like Austin versus LeBron and is one of those guys not on the floor. I have a hard, especially with you needing a certain amount of, like even when you go small, you still need a certain amount of size and rebounding and defense. I wonder if that even just means like Austin isn't out there in certain configurations, but I think in general, as we've seen, like they've yet to bench the big three in any clutch moment outside of maybe like a random possession here or there. So in general, they're going to close with those three. So I like this group. I would like to see more of it. All right, I'm going to wrap here though. I appreciate you guys for rocking with me. I'll be back in about 24 hours, less than 24 hours. It's an earlier game, 6:30 against Sacramento. But for those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. If you made it this far, you made it this deep, 2 hours in, please consider subscribing. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Double checking. I did not miss any super chats. Awesome. Appreciate you guys. Lakers won. The skid is over. There is some sunshine in the sky for at least another 24 hours. Shout out to the chat. Shout out to the late night gang. Appreciate you guys. And I will talk to you all tomorrow.